Good evening. My name is Dave Larson, Superintendent at District 87. And I'd like to welcome you to the third presentation of Glenbard Parent Series. We have a really special topic tonight, and it relates to where we're at and our journey as a community and as families. I just want to acknowledge and thank parents for your patience and resolve and support and empathy and really your partnership as we navigated through the last few weeks of remote learning. And now obviously we have the hybrid program that we're excited about. We started this week. And many of the other districts within the community, the Glenbard elementary districts as well as surrounding districts. Thank you for joining us. Just want to give a quick shout out to our tech team from COD, Chris and Elmir, for their good work, and their GPS team. Obviously Gilda, which we'll hear from, and Jerica for your good work in coordinating and putting the time and bringing this program together. So let me turn it over to Gilda to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thanks, Dr. Larson. Welcome, everybody. So happy that you could join us tonight. As you all have heard by now, it's the 25th anniversary of the Glenbard Parent Series. And when it was time to organize our Glenbard Parent Series, we thought about who are the people that we want to have come back? Who are the highlights of some of the last 25 years? And that was absolutely Dr. Christine Carter. And we wouldn't have had it any other way. But making this all possible are all of the sponsors who are on this brochure that you can find at glenbardgps.org. Special thanks to the Sabrin Goodman Foundation and the Sabrin Goodman Center of the Lillian and Larry Goodman Foundation that are making sure that this is going out to all families everywhere. Please spread the word that everyone is welcome. When we're in person, everyone's welcome. When we're online, let them know that please join us. You will always walk away with a takeaway. You will always learn something. And any grade level, if your child is young, if your child is 25, you're going to learn something here, always. Again, a huge, huge, huge honor to be welcoming someone that I just think so highly of, and that's Dr. Christine Carter. I always learn from her. She's the author of 3 books when she was with us in 2003. 2007, I believe, she talked about her book, Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. Since then, she's written The Sweet Spot, How to Accomplish More by Doing Less. She is with the Greater Good Science Center near her home in Berkeley, California. She is the parent of 4 teenagers. Right there, you know, that's the hardest job of all. And we'll be talking about this wonderful book, The New Adolescent, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in a Time of Anxiety and Distraction. Without further ado, Dr. Carter.
Thank you so much, Gilda. I am so happy to be back here with you and everyone else. I hope there are some people out there that are watching that were here way back when.
So I have 3 kids in their 20s. So you're probably 5-10 years behind me, right? High school teenagers. You have 4, right?
I have college. I have 2 high schoolers and 2 college students.
Okay, so you're a little bit behind me. So I'm just gonna say I'm guilty of a lot of those examples that you gave. So I have like a flood of questions and examples. Let me just dive into the role and the mindset of the parent when you're having those conversations. I have found that in my book, my wife and I have talked about this, that you're helping with accepting and probing and encouraging. At the same time, you want something, whether it's a better grade, or a great example is I was a big sports dad. I wanted my kids to make the teams. If my child came home, made the B team instead of the A team, I was like, how do I hide my disappointment, right? He's disappointed, made the B team. How do I still encourage him? So talk a little bit about parents kind of keeping their emotion in check as they encourage and support.
You know, I think one of the most important things that we can say to the people in our lives and to teach our kids is that they are not responsible for other people's emotions. They are responsible for their own actions, right? I'm not saying that, but like how I feel as a parent about a decision a kid might make, especially like, or if they didn't make the sports team or whatever, right? They're not responsible for that. And so, and we don't really want them to feel responsible for our emotional reactions. We want them to feel responsible for their own actions, right? And their own emotions, really, to be in touch with that. And so I just think that like making that distinction is important. So you as a dad, totally entitled to all of the emotions that you have, right? You get to feel disappointed, right? I'm not saying you don't get to feel disappointed. I'm saying go talk to your partner about the fact that you feel disappointed.
Yeah.
And when your teenager or your kid walks in the door, ask them how they feel, right? What's important is how they feel about making the B team, right? And then not trying to convince them to feel otherwise. So maybe they're not disappointed. Maybe they're putting on a brave face and saying, well, now I'm not going to spend the season on the bench. I'm excited that I get to play. And then you can say, yeah, that's like, you know, like I am thinking of a situation that was in a household very close to mine, extended family, where it was the exact same thing. And it was like the family member was trying to convince the kid to talk to the coach, to try again, to sit on the bench for the whole season, basically. Yeah. Right. And it was like, no, let them have how they're feeling. And if they're feeling disappointed, don't try and talk them out of that disappointment. Right. Sure. Like, it's like, yep, that's disappointing. Let them process that before we start looking for silver linings.
So another question from the perspective and role of a parent, you really hit the mark when you said give privacy and independence, right? Especially teenagers they need autonomy, as you described. They need to make decisions. They need to live with their decisions. How about if you're really worried they're going down the wrong path, they're choosing wrong friends, and what's that balance of getting involved so that they don't do something that's maybe illegal or really inappropriate? How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. We are a high monitoring household here, right? Like, but we don't track our kids, right? So it's finding sort of painting really, really bright lines for them in terms of what's okay and what's not okay. And making sure that they have a lot of privacy. Like, so when this whole shelter in place thing started for us, we sort of established time frame. It was too much togetherness for all of us. And one of my kids is particularly sensitive to sound. I don't know if you can tell, I'm kind of loud. The 3 girls are really loud. And you know what I mean? So we needed to sort of say, all right, we're all in our rooms from X time to X time. This is like total privacy. Nobody's going to interrupt us. Nobody's, I'm not going to ask you what you're doing, we sort of set a schedule around there. So that's the privacy piece of things, right? And I trust them to make their own decisions when it comes to that. Everything else, it's like we can be highly engaged in what they're doing. We can ask them tons of questions about the choices that they're making. We can still let that be their call, right? Once they get older, we can say, you can make your own decisions. It really is your call. I'd like those decisions to be informed. And here's the information that I would like you to have,
That's great. That's great. Talk about the word consultants. I've heard parents, when the kids get older, you're supposed to be a consultant and not kind of be less autocratic and more consultant role. Right. Speak to that.
Yeah, we really need to step down as their chief of staff, right? I think a lot of parents find it rewarding in a lot of ways, and it gives us a sense of purpose to be really managing our kids. Yeah. And it's not healthy for them as they enter adolescence to have somebody else managing everything for them. They need a sense of agency and they need a sense of control over their own lives. So, but that doesn't mean, so when we sort of step down as their chief of staff doing things for them, it doesn't mean we become disengaged, right? We're right there next to them and we expect to be consulted. That doesn't mean they have to do what we say. And we need to be really careful as a consultant not to use words like should or have to ever, because that always implies force. So if you say, you're not acting as a consultant if you say you should do X, Y, or Z, right? Because that's just that their brains hear that as like the dictator has spoken, right? So to say, I personally think that you would do really well to do X, Y, or Z, but it's your call.
Yeah. Let's go back to that relationship, autonomy about grades. Thriving in school means working hard and enjoying your classes, but also we have targets, right? Grades, SAT scores, they're all important. And a parent can be overly intense. And so how about that balance of ensuring your messaging that it's important, but also you back off and have the child kind of take ownership?
Yeah, this is so huge because I think parents often will hamstring their kids. They destroy a kid's intrinsic motivation to learn. And the goal is learning, right? The ultimate goal is that they fulfill their potential as a student and really learn a lot. And so once again, stepping into that consultant role, you can be really engaged. You can ask a lot of questions, right? Help them if they're not doing well, helping them pinpoint why. Right? Like, where do they need more help? A lot of times they just don't know what the obstacle is. So asking them, where do you think that, I can see that you're not getting this concept in math yet, right? Yep. Like we'll get you there. It's not that you're so concerned about the grade. What we need to be concerned about is the learning. Yep. And how parents can actually be really supportive. They might be afraid, a kid might be afraid to contact a teacher, but really clearly need help, right? Yep. So we can help them overcome that hurdle, learn to advocate for themselves. We don't jump in and contact the teacher for them, really. Yep. Like after 5th grade, I would say, right? Like the kids really need to learn to do it themselves, but we can do it alongside them. We can really help them. In fact, I just helped my 18-year-old senior in high school formulate an email to an admissions officer last night, right? Like I actually was like, yeah, let me just like help you rewrite that a little bit, because he was struggling and he didn't have a model. He didn't know how to do it yet, right? So I could teach him and then he could have the conversation with her himself.
One of the things I see more and more with teenagers is conflict with friends per the social media, right? There's so much communication, and it's interesting how there's bullying, there's falling out among his or her friends. They might not even be interacting with them face to face, but things happen through Facebook and texting. So it can get wild, just totally wild for the mood of the teenager can just be destroyed because of some information they read. How does a parent kind of help and shepherd through that stage and those experiences?
Yeah, not just the mood, like the week, the month, the semester. I have seen it. It is astonishing how bad it can be. And so I think it's really important for us to be in tune with what's happening, to really talk with our kids a lot about social media. What platforms are they on? Which platforms do they really love? How do they feel when they spend a lot of time on those platforms, right? So social media has a lot of different places, right, and there's a lot of different things that are happening. So in our household recently, there was a cyberbullying incident that took place on Twitter. I was like, I didn't even know teenagers were on Twitter. And they're like, well, we aren't on Twitter. We aren't on Twitter, but she is on Twitter. And then somebody screenshotted it and put it in Snapchat. And then that person, then it ended up on, I don't know, like, it just goes, they move all across.
Complex.
The whole thing. So talking to them about like, okay, so all of my kids go through periods of time in which they will delete the apps, this like Instagram in particular, but also TikTok now, from their phones, right? And they might keep Snapchat because it's more like texting to them. But we talk about like, when do they feel better? They feel better when they're not addicted to it. They feel better when they're not posting a lot and then looking to see if people have commented or liked the posts. You know, social media really invites comparison and insecurity and materialism and these things that don't feel good. And so as parents, we can ask them questions about that all the time.
Staying close to it. Last question, then we'll bring Gilda on. You wrote Raising Happiness, and that was a whole generation of parents. You were here 7 years ago. Talk about that, the themes in that book, contrasting with your current book, The New Adolescence.
Oh my gosh, Raising Happiness just seems so quaint to me now. Right? Like this was, I mean, I wrote that actually longer, like 12 years ago at least.
Okay.
So my kids were really little and we didn't have smartphones. You know what I mean? Like it was
It's a
totally
lot
different
easier
era.
back then.
But I don't think
easier.
there's no chapter in Raising Happiness about technology, because we were still arguing about how much like PBS we were like gonna let our toddlers watch, right? Like anyway, okay, so it does seem really quaint. All the principles still stand, and in fact, we're talking about doing a 10th edition of it, and it's like, you know, there's a chapter, for example, on like family meals and how to make the best out of family meals, how to get the most out of them, why they're important, what kids learn. The same still applies about why gratitude can really shape the way kids view the world and sort of counter a sense of entitlement and like actually bring a real resilience in. So it's all, you know, all from a research standpoint, because I didn't make these things up, right? Like I just looked at the research, and from a research standpoint, it all still stands. The New Adolescence is much more about, less about happiness and more about like how to handle it if your teenager is struggling, or how to influence a teenager who seems to be making bad decisions, or you know, there's a whole big chapter on sex, right? That I was not going to put that in Raising Happiness, but like everything is different about sex now from when we were kids.
Right. So you've lived it. These aren't like in the lab research. This is real parenting, and obviously both books, and excited about this one because you're living it with your 4 young adults. So let's get Gilda on, and she'll guide us through the last 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Larson. Thanks, Christine. Yes, the questions are coming in. As a matter of fact, you just said, you mentioned you have a chapter on sex, and somebody just texted about that. How do I have that conversation with my child? And we're having Peggy Ornstein come next month. She'll be talking about her 2 books, Girls and Sex, Boys and Sex. So give us a little preview of, you know, what you could.
Oh my gosh, to let Peggy answer that question. Read her books. I think that they're really good. Okay, so talking to kids about sex, it's not just one conversation anymore. There's a whole bunch of different conversations that we can have. My best advice is short little conversations, right? Like little snippets. Just have in mind one little piece of information that you want to ask about to see if they understand it, and then give them a little bit of information, but try not to build it up too much. I don't know, you know, I was raised in a household where we did not actually ever talk about sex, ever, never, right? And so it's very uncomfortable for me to talk about, at least at the beginning, it was very, very uncomfortable for me to talk about it. And if that's true for you, what I have to say is you can do it, right? You can handle the discomfort. It's super important. Kids are getting a lot more information about sex than we ever had, and they are getting it from pornography. And the age of first pornography usage is getting younger and younger. It's 9 or 10 years old. It is, they need accurate information. Obviously, the information they're getting from porn is not accurate, right? And it is affecting their sexual development. So even if the only thing you can do is just have a little tiny conversation before you're just too uncomfortable to continue, that's fine. Your teenager is uncomfortable too. They prefer a short conversation as well.
Very good. Okay, this is a question from Anne. How can I get my 17-year-old son to talk to me, much less sit in the same room as me? Also, how can I get him to stop constantly using foul language and follow house rules? For example, be home when I say be home at night. His curfew on the weekends is midnight. I think that's generous.
Okay, there's so many questions there. I want to just start with the talk to you, right? So providing some real habitual structure around a place to talk. And once kids can, drive, the car is no longer, a habitual, like a everyday place where they can talk. So dinner time, insisting on a dinner time, I think is a really important family practice, right? Where, now because there are no sports intervening and there's nothing else, right? But if you're a divorced family, for example, and you only have your kids half the time, all of those weeknights that they're with you, for example, sitting down saying, it's only 20 minutes, doesn't have to be super long, but we're going to sit without devices with each other, eat the same meal at the same time, I think is and over time, just spending that time together and, and expressing curiosity in their experience, anything. It's true that boys can be less communicative, right? We know that this is true, but just providing the opportunity can help. All the other things that were mentioned, I can't even remember all of them, but I do think that it's really, really important to have boundaries and structure for kids, and they shouldn't have privileges that their devices, you're probably paying for the cell phone, right? So they need to use it in a way that you feel is responsible, or they don't get it. Same thing with the car, same thing with their freedom just to be out. I think that parents today are afraid that their kids won't like them if they enforce the rules. And it's simply not true. There is no research that supports that being really permissive as a parent and not sort of enforcing boundaries and structures that they need to develop good habits and feel safe. Doing that is not necessarily even going to upset your kids, although they will lead you, at first they will, right? But they will tend to feel more secure. Your relationship will tend to be better the more boundaried you are. So the key is to provide the structure, with older teenagers, let them help have some input in terms of what they feel is reasonable for the rules so that they have some buy-in around it. And then have a lot of warmth in your enforcement, right? Have a lot of compassion. They don't have to like it, right? But you don't have to take, them yelling at you or being rude to you or any of those things. So you're still the parent, and that's what they need.
Thank you. I heard you talking on the radio yesterday, WGN, you were talking about the importance of that dinner time, that 20-minute, no devices. And you also said, and parents, this applies to you too. That is so important. Isn't that role modeling?
Oh, it is. And it's boy, they just do what we do, right? I had a parent that I was working with the other day say, well, we have dinner, now they expect me to be off my computer. And I'm like, your laptop at the dinner table? What is the point? The point is face-to-face contact. It is more important than ever, given how isolated we are within our families. We shouldn't be isolated in our own homes.
Right. Thank you. Okay, this is from Susan. How can I get our very independent high school senior girl to open up and let mom and dad know what she's feeling and share more? I come to all the GPS presentations. I'm reading all the books, and I'm take the advice, and she's a big fan of yours. So how do we get them to open up?
Ask a lot of questions, right? But I think the first thing is that to give her a lot of privacy. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if she feels like she has privacy, she has her own space, she might be more willing to open up. right? So making sure that you're not judgmental, that you're going to bring curiosity and acceptance to her experience, to whatever it is that she tells you. You're not going to criticize, you're not going to correct, you're not going to try and fix, you're not going to enter in. Like, that creates a safe space for her.
That sounds similar to this next question. Has this child there that's unmotivated and angry, has the friend group just blew up. She's 8th grade daughter. And it sounds like it's just an awful time. We go places. She likes to go to thrift shops. It's lots of fun. And then we get home and we say, let's get to work, and absolutely not. So she sounds angry.
Yeah. 8th grade is really, really, really hard for girls. Middle school in general is really hard for girls. And, having activities that you can do together to provide her from some relief from whatever is happening on her phone, probably a lot of this cyberbullying. I mean, it's terrible, a lot of what's going on. That's great. And it's also like not necessarily an outlet for what's really happening. And so, I was talking earlier about emotion suppression and how that can like really hinder a person's ability, especially in adolescence, ability to buckle down to work when we need to do it, right? If she's holding in all this pain, it's great to be able to like provide her some distraction from that, relief from that, like a sort of safe space. But what she also needs is to be able to process those emotions, right? Like whatever is happening socially with that friend group that's blown up, she's not the only one it's happened to. It's actually unfortunately, it's pretty normal in 8th grade. She will be okay, but it's so difficult. She might not be able to buckle down and get to her homework. So finding her a therapist now online to try and help give her somebody else to talk to try and process what is happening can help.
And if one therapist doesn't work, then maybe it means
try another one. Yes, there are a lot of really good therapists out there, and there are a lot of ones that just are not a good fit, right? And then one of the most important things is that your teenager feel that the therapist can empathize with them, that they understand what they're feeling. And so that's the most important barometer. If they say, yep, she gets me, great, go with that person.
Got it. You just said something, you're not the only one. This really is a question that I hear often from parents when they're just they're feeling so helpless about what's going on. My child's missing school, and so talk about how you're not the only one, that all of these kids are going through this at the same time.
Yeah, all of these kids are going through this at the same time. This is an enormously difficult time, and it's more difficult for some families than it is for others, but for everyone, like, it's just relative to their own experience, right? And so to really acknowledge, like, this is really, really, really hard. And also, it's not necessarily going to put a dent in you that you won't recover from, right? Like, this can be a really hard time. You don't have to be happy for the entire rest of this school year. You don't have to like any of it. You don't have to be happy. And that's okay, right? Like, you can feel other things. I hope that you'll feel grateful for, that we still have food on the table, if that's happening, right? Like, or whatever, like, they can feel lots and lots of things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be happiness. Now, one of the best things that we can do during a really hard time for all of us is to identify a sense of purpose, or to find some meaning in the difficulty. So one question that, we're still talking about in my household that we raised back in April, we started talking about how historic this was, right? And it just keeps getting more and more historic, there's a lot of historic things happening. So originally it was like, oh, well, our grandchildren, my children's grandchildren are going to interview them in the same way that they interviewed people's grandparents who were in the Holocaust or in World War II, or, you know, that. And so to think like, okay, I know that you're only 16, but imagine yourself at age 80 being interviewed by a grandchild or your grandchild's friend. What will you say your role was? Not just like, what was your experience, but what did you do that mattered in this? Did you go to the protests? Who, you know, did you, you know, I have a kid who's not old enough to vote, but who's working as a poll worker on election day, right? Like, so like, what did you do that mattered during this historic time?
Yeah, that's beautiful. So a couple of questions about the big three: marijuana, vaping, and alcohol. What do you let's start with marijuana, okay?
Okay. You know, I'm glad that you say, let's start with marijuana, because this is like, yeah, I get a lot of hate mail about this because I have a very, very strong research-based point of view. I'm very concerned about the marijuana usage that I'm seeing. I'm getting a lot of questions from parents asking me, they're like, oh, my teenage son says marijuana helps him with anxiety. Is like, a little bit is okay, right? And I think we've been, as a society, brainwashed by the pro-marijuana lobby. And like, of course, there are medicinal benefits to, especially to CBD, right? Like for adults, what I want parents to understand, first of all, it's illegal, right, for teenagers to use. But what I want them to understand is that the medicinal benefits do not apply to the adolescent brain. THC, it works totally differently in the teenage brain than it does in an adult brain. So brain development, for starters, brain development is more significant during adolescence than during any other developmental stage besides when a baby is in the womb. So this is a very critical, it's a very critical brain development time period. And the brain's natural endocannabinoid system, which is affected by marijuana use, plays a very important role in the brain development that is particular to teenagers. So, and what happens is that the brain growth that we see only during adolescence is temporarily halted by marijuana use, because THC, which is the ingredient in marijuana that produces the high, binds with the brain's cannabinoid system, the CB1 receptors, and that blocks their normal function. It also makes teenagers really, really high, and which makes it much more addictive for them. You know, we think, oh, marijuana is not addictive. Well, marijuana from the 1970s was 2 to 3% THC, and it wasn't addictive. There was also much higher levels of CBD in it, which would limit the high quite a bit. You know, we're seeing kids vaping synthetic cannabis products that are upwards of 80% THC, and like the sort of like common on the street weed that they're smoking is 20 to 30% THC. So it's really powerful in this brain. It locks in for longer in the adult brain, and in fact, neuroscience is showing us that if a teen gets high on a Thursday night, they can be high for the effects in the brain, and actually like feelings of being high can last for 5 to 7 days. Like, that is astonishing. Nobody seems to understand this. I say this and like people don't believe me. I'm like, well, this is just like there's tons of research on this actually. And like, I'm not making this up. Like, this is the way it works in the brain.
Right. Very, very important. Of course, we're going to talk about self-care. And once again, the example that parents set. Can you tell us about self-care? And we know it's worse in adolescence, this difficult time. Maybe, talk about that as well.
Yeah. If you take only one thing away from this talk, here's what I hope it is. This is a time to invest in yourself as a parent, not in your kids, in yourself. You are your most important resource for surviving 2020 and surviving the pandemic. You're also your best tool for raising happy and healthy kids, for being the parent that you really want to be. But we human beings don't do very well when we defer maintenance on the system. And we're seeing a lot of deferred maintenance among the parents right now. So by investing in yourself, I mean, choose healthy comfort items. This is super hard. It's very stressful. We need to comfort ourselves, and we need to choose healthy comfort items, right? So can you mask up and go for a hike with a friend? Can you just call a friend and leave the house no matter how cold it is outside or wet or whatever it is? Can you get out of the house and have a private conversation to talk about how you're feeling, right? We're seeing a lot of unhealthy comfort things, which is understandable. Like drinking is way up among adults, and we can also laugh, right? We are human. All the memes about day drinking are we get it, but it points to the fact that we just need to find healthy ways. Can you take a little nap because now you're working from home, right? What can you do to invest in yourself so that you can be the parent that you want to be?
Right. You had a really great YouTube. It was a TED Talk, excuse me, that you did recently about exercise. Will you tell us about that TED Talk, please?
Sure. It was about how all my routines fell completely apart again and again. I kept, here I am, I'm kind of an expert in behavior change. And I'm like, all right, well, I thought that I would, I couldn't go to the gym, and I had an exercise routine that I really, really loved. And I thought that I'm like, all right, well, I'll run a half marathon, which, by the way, I haven't done since I was in my 20s, right? It's absurd, but I was totally convinced. And I spent weeks planning out the perfect, I really thought we were going to be traveling again by now. And so I had planned out, I was going to take the kids on a college trip to a destination marathon, whatever. Anyway, it's about the real way to get yourself into a healthy routine. It's called Confessions of a Bad Exerciser.
And it's okay to be do these things in increments. We don't have to go all out. We can just do what you can. Isn't that what you were talking about?
Yes, that's the punchline. Everything that the science tells us about how to get into a healthy habit for yourself is just start. Initiation is really hard. Just get yourself over the initiation hump, right? And do something really easy. So I started running again. I'm not training for a half marathon, don't worry. But I started running again by running for just 1 minute at a time. And then I would walk for as long as felt comfortable, or I felt like I had time. And now I run for 15 or 20 minutes. But you just start really small. So one thing to know is that whenever you're making an effort, and you know what? Meditating can feel like an effort. Taking a nap, if you have to leave your work, can feel like an effort. Anything these healthy comfort items that I'm talking about, they can feel like an effort. And if it's an effort, you have to be motivated to do it. And right now, nobody has any motivation, right? And so we have to bring the effort level down. And so just initiate the behavior. That's all you need to do. Eventually it will organically evolve into something more if it's inherently rewarding, which it will be if it's healthy.
We're getting close to the end here. Help me help all of the people listening on here. School closed in March, and we never imagined that here we would be in fall. All the things that you've said, it's just really hard now. So leave us with some hopeful, even if it means repeating some of what you've said, some of the things that we can do to keep our families as positive. I was listening to the news tonight and, heard about some of these statistics that have just come out about 1 in 5 of the depression, the suicide, it's been a long time of this. So leave us with what we can do now.
Yeah. So, and we might have a long time more.
True.
So
Right.
what we can do now is focus on others. How can we help other people? This is what will help us feel better in all of this. Think about the role that you're playing. How are you supporting other people right now? How are you supporting your neighbors? How are you supporting your school? They are trying their hardest, right? Like how are you supporting your teachers? Like, what are you doing to be a force for good? Vote, do, like, engage.
That's great. Thank you so much. I always enjoy our conversations, and I know the people listening. I appreciate your letting us share the questions and the conversation this afternoon or this evening. I can't wait to have you back again. If you do an update of Raising Happiness, we'll see you again. You mentioned the text is 66866.
Yep.
I love, you all, every time I think about the importance of gratitude, I think about you. I think for those of you who are listening, when Dr. Carter was with us 7 years ago, she talked about how when she tucks her children in at night, because they were children, she asks them about to be grateful, asks them to share something that they're grateful for during their day. And you mentioned to me that here they are, and how this gets you looking at the whole world in a different way. And I've shared that with so many people and my own children who we still, connect with each other around this. So be grateful for what we have. Because we are, those of us that are listening certainly are fortunate to be here tonight, listening to someone like you. And you make me grateful for all the sponsors. And another additional sponsor that came in for tonight was Northwestern Medicine. I want to thank them. I want to thank the College of DuPage, Goodman Center, all of the people that bring this to us, the Case organization, the health department, the Annie Gaffey Foundation. Thank you all. Come back. We've got a couple of programs that are coming up that you don't want to miss. You mentioned mindfulness. We have a program on November 5th with Michael Maslar on mindfulness, and you want to check in on that. That's Thursday, November 5th at 7 p.m. Then, as we mentioned, we have Peggy Ornstein coming on Tuesday, November 7th, navigating the landscape of teen sexuality and relationships. And a big fan of, I know you're a huge fan of Dr. Tina Payne Bryson, Christine, who's coming on.
I am. I love her. She's
And
so good.
She's so
really
good. And really, it's continuing the thread of what we talked about the power of showing up in this time of chaos. She'll be talking at 6:30 to the younger parents about discipline. And then at 7 p.m., we'll talk to the parents of teenagers about the power of showing up. Dr. Larson, thank you so much. Christine.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Larson.
We've got a survey at the end. Come back soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Take care.
Take care.
Good night.